Today we're talking elasticity of supply and demand. We've been talking supply and demand. We've done some analysis on these things. We've looked at how changes in supply and demand can change a market. We've talked about an equilibrium point and what equilibrium means. Today we'll talk about elasticity of supply and demand. We've said that consumers react to changes in prices and producers react to changes in prices. Markets follow the laws of supply and demand. The law of demand being that as prices rise, people tend to demand less and less of something. The law of supply meaning that as prices rise, people want to supply more and more of it. For elasticity, we ask ourselves, how responsive are consumers and producers to changes in prices? If we decide that they are very responsive, we say that supply and demand are elastic. Elastic. They're changeable. Elastic like a rubber band. Can be small, can be big. Elastic. If we say that consumers are not so responsive to changes, we say that they are inelastic. Inelastic. Let's start doing some graphs. I'll give you some examples. Let's start with purple. Before I even start drawing anything, where are we going to fall? Elastic. I think our demand curve for cigarettes is going to look a bit like this. Here's our demand curve. And we might have a much more traditional supply curve. D, demand still slopes down. But let's look at what could happen. We're at an equilibrium point here. We'll call it Q1 and P1. And let's say that we raise the price of cigarettes dramatically. we're going to raise the price of cigarettes by a lot. Listen, you people are smoking too much. It's costing us too much in your health care bills. It's just bad for you. We're going to decide that we know what's best for all of you. You should stop smoking. We can't just pass laws that say you have to stop smoking. We can't put the companies out of business. So we're going to do the one thing that we have a lot of control over, and what's that?
Tax it.
We're going to tax them. When we tax something, we make it more expensive. Econ 101. When we tax something, we make it more expensive. When we make something more expensive, the law of demand says that we get less of it. We're going to dramatically increase the price of cigarettes to what we'll call a point here at P2. This will put us at a new point on the demand schedule here. We drop down from this point. You can call this our first equilibrium and our second equilibrium point. We drop down from here, and true to the law of supply and demand, our quantity has decreased, right? Our quantity has decreased by a little. But our price increased by what? A lot. How responsive are these consumers to changes in price? I think they're relatively inelastic here. I think these consumers are relatively inelastic. We've changed the price a lot, and people have said, I'm going to smoke less. How much less? A little bit less, not a lot less. Why? Are smokers so wealthy that they don't care about the price? They're addicted. We're hooked on nicotine. I smoked my last cigarette October 10th of 2012. Probably the worst thing I've ever done is getting off of those things. Just awful, awful. My physician, who's also a friend of mine, did his residency in a substance abuse treatment center. He did a residency there. And he said that he's seen people who could get off of heroin and couldn't quit smoking. Awful. If you want to smoke, smoke. But very, very addictive. It took me a lot longer to quit than I thought it should have. And it was a lot worse. Anybody else quit? If you want to, you don't have to. It's worse for longer than you think it's going to be, isn't it? You would think 3 months in, you're like, I'm good, don't worry about it. Untruth. Bad. Don't start if you haven't. Hey, we're addicted. That's why I think that demand is relatively inelastic. Relatively inelastic. Let's do another example. This one will be apps for your phone. Apps for your phone. As is custom, price and vertical axis, quantity along the bottom. Don't like this one either. Not having a great client day. If the price of your iPhone or Android or Windows phone app is very low, how many people can you expect to download it? A lot. Here. What's an example of a low priced app? Yeah, 0. What's an example of a high priced app? What's that?
$5.
$5 would be a really high price. Who else has bought an app for $5? Just a few of us. Who's bought an app for $3? Who's bought an app for 99 cents? Almost the whole room. You know what I think a high priced app might be? I'm going to put 99 cents right here at our equilibrium point. And I think a high priced app might be $2 or $1.99. But let's say you're really proud of your app, you really think your app is amazing, you really think your app is fantastic, so you are going to go up to your 99% price, your 99 cent price. You think that people are willing to pay your 99 cent price for your app. Okay, let's see what happens. We move from Q1 to Q2. You've only increased the price of your app by 99 cents, a relatively small increase, but now the number of people downloading your app has decreased that says dramatically. It has gone down a lot. And I think this is the case for most phone apps. I really do. I think this is what the market looks like. We're expected to be getting things for free, aren't we? We want the things for free now, especially the things on our phone. We've been accustomed to getting things for free. What are app developers and things doing to get around this? They'll give it to us for free, but they'll put ads in it. Flappy Bird. Everybody else still have Flappy Bird on the phone? Crazy people. Flappy Bird, they put ads on the top. You can sit there and repeatedly watch your bird die in a horrific manner, quickly and rapidly over and over and over again. What else do we do? They'll do the in-app purchase. Right? You can have the app for free, but if you want to unlock the thing to do whatever, you have to pay more for that. Or they'll just start charging more. A lot of people are just saying, listen, this is worth something, we're going to charge you. But I think this happens. I think that the market for phone apps and this piece of software is relatively elastic. And there's some data that backs this up. I'll speak briefly about the supply curve. If it turned out that everyone was willing to pay a lot more for apps, what would we see more people want to do? Build a lot more. Yeah, even more than we have. I think we'd build a lot more apps. Even though I'm developing an app is the new I'm writing a screenplay, I still think we'd get a lot more. So in this case, we have a market for cigarettes that is relatively inelastic. These customers are not swayed by price very much. They're swayed by price a little. We still decrease a bit, but not a lot. A big move in price doesn't change the number sold very much. Here, in phone apps, these are very elastic. They are very responsive to a change in price. And we see that a small increase in price dramatically decreases the number sold. Deciding what to charge for your app in the App Store is a big deal as to how many units you're going to move. A very big deal, I think. What are some others that I put up here? In the relatively elastic, we've talked about insulin is one of my favorites, and other types of healthcare. If you have a toothache, a boring, achy, set in your skull toothache, How concerned are you with the price of your dentist? You're concerned, but not a lot, especially come day 3. Because a toothache is something that you could just never, if you're hurting your foot, you can get off the foot. And it'll feel better. A toothache is something you can't ever escape. And after about day 3 without being able to sleep, you're going to get a lot more inelastic about price. A lot of healthcare is like this. Cigarettes is one I always mention. We've briefly talked about gasoline as being relatively inelastic. I think that your utilities, your water bill, your electric bill, I think we can talk about these things as being relatively inelastic. I think people are willing to pay the extra units for it, and they don't think about it very often. They don't think about washing the car one more time, doing one more load of laundry. I think people are relatively inelastic. Here's another one I put on this list. Have we seen college costs do what over the last 10 years? Up, down, or stable? Up a little bit?
A lot.
Up a lot. A lot, a lot. Increasing even faster than the cost of healthcare. Some of us believe there is a higher education price bubble out there. I am among them. But since the price has gone up, have we seen a lot fewer people enroll in universities? No. No. We've seen more. This would seem to break the law of demand, accepting technical factors. These things, I think, are relatively inelastic. Things that I think are relatively inelastic, I'm going to go back to my old favorite, fast food. The price of the value meal is about $5. I think if somebody went up to 7, they'd lose a lot of business. I don't think they have a lot of changes in price. Stocks, bonds, commodities, things that are traded on open markets are, of course, very, very elastic. If the price for a bit of GE stock is listed at $32 and someone's willing to pay, someone's willing to sell it to you for $33, never make that deal. It's perfectly elastic. Typically, things that are more elastic are things that are widely available, there are many firms selling them. Many firms. And there are very low barriers to entry into the market. Low barriers to entry. Is it easier to make a phone app or a car company? Car company, we wish. Someone came out today, I read today that they've invented the first 3D printed car. They print out all the pieces and put wheels and glass and engine and everything, and they want to start selling it next year for 15 grand. 15 grand. Top speed, 40 miles an hour. Range between electrical chargings, like 120 miles. And I took one look at it, and the first thing I thought is that thing is a death trap. Like, it's 3D printed, that thing will fold up around you. You're going to get killed by somebody in, like, a Mini Cooper. And that shouldn't be right.
No.
Relatively high barriers to entry to a car company. Relatively low barriers to entry to writing a new phone app. The guy who wrote Flappy Bird was one guy in Vietnam. One guy in Vietnam who wrote Flappy Bird. And then was making about $50,000 to $100,000 a month just off of the ads. Relatively low barriers to entry. Now, looking just at the demand curves here, what's the difference between these two? It's the slope of these two lines, right? This is very steep. This is very shallow. As we remember from high school math, slope is our rise over run, right? Which is our change in y over our change in x. This is a delta, not just for Greek organizations anymore. When you see a delta, it indicates mathematically a change in. The change in y over the change in x. Or, since we're using these graphs, our change in y, which is price, over our change in quantity equals our elasticity. So we can easily calculate this, right? This is relatively easy to calculate. Given this, and if I had the type of smart board that I imagined in my mind, they'd show me these smart boards, and they're like, look, it'll print out what you've done. That's not terribly smart to me. I want the smart board to work like, I should be able to grab this and drag it over here and then scale it up. And then I just dream of these things and they don't exist. If any of you are skilled engineers, this is what I'm looking for. But if I could cut this piece out and pull it up here, here's my green, and here's the difference between Q1 and Q2 and P1 and P2, which is 99 cents. We're going to round that up and call it $1. And then let's say we put our app out on the market and we've sold 1 million copies of it when it was free. And when we go down here, we only sell 250,000. Our elasticity is our change in price, $1 over our change here. One divided by 750,000, which is negative 0.00000 something or another, right? Same thing here. Pull this out. Let's say we decide to increase the price of our cigarettes by $3. In our Q1 to Q2, oh, we'll just talk about one particular convenience store or whatever that sells 100 fewer packs of cigarettes. Our elasticity is our change in price, 3 over our 100. Etc., right? Still negative. All these are going to be in negative terms because demand curves slope down, right? Demand curve still slope down. This price is we've sold negative 100 fewer. That's what our delta quantity is. Can we easily compare these two numbers and say one is more or less elastic than the other? Not really. Not really. We're kind of apples to oranges here, aren't we? We're kind of apples to oranges. It would be better to compare these if we looked at the state of Kentucky, which increased cigarette taxes by $3, versus the state of Indiana, which increased tobacco taxes by $2. And if we look at those two different things, now we've got a ballgame. Now we can say, we can calculate the difference in elasticity between these two states. We can, based on that, we could probably do the math that calculates what if Tennessee wanted to raise cigarette taxes by $6? We could use Kentucky and Indiana and get a rough estimate of how to do what Tennessee might experience, right? The math here is not shockingly difficult. Good, let's make the math shockingly difficult. I'm not going to do that. I just want to point out briefly, and you don't need to put this in your notes, just for those of you who want it, there's no absolute need to put this in your notes. I'm drawing my supply and demand curves as straight lines, and your book often draws them as a curve that looks like this, right? This is more accurate. Demand curves slope down because there's diminishing returns, and sometimes diminishing returns increase to scale. And that's why this is curved and convex to the origin. So over here I'm doing a simple rise over run. If I wanted to do a more complex with this curve, how would I do it? Louder, somebody had it. Yeah, you take the first derivative of this curve. And is this possible? Sure. What is this curve half of? This curve is really just half of a parabola, right? And a parabola is a quadratic function. It's going to be y equals x squared plus or minus something or another, et cetera, et cetera. We can take the derivative of this fairly easily. And if we want to know at a certain price P1 and a certain quantity Q1, if we wanted to know what the elasticity was at this point, we take a tangent to the line at that point, plug in our P1 and P2, take the derivative, and we can find our point in time elasticity, right? It's just like the point of change we learned in Intro to Calculus, for those of you who had Intro to Calculus. So looking at the ones in the book, this can be done just as easily, we just have to do it with a tiny little bit of calculus. Over here, it's simply rise over run. When this becomes quadratic, we just have to make a slight change for this curve. Yeah?
So can you assume with a steeper slope that those items will always be more inelastic?
Yes.
And, okay.
Yes. Yeah. The slope, I don't want to say the slope is what determines the elasticity. I'll say it the other way. The elasticity of the good is what determines the slope of the demand curve, right? The elasticity of the goods is what determines the slope of the demand curve. Any questions on this? Applications of this. Applications of this. Hurricane Andrew was in 1994, I think. I think it was in...
Actually, it's 92.
Is it 92? Yeah, I was 17. I was 17 in 1992, and that's when Hurricane Andrew hit. I always have trouble with uneven numbers, getting them mixed up sometimes. Hurricane Andrew hit in 1992. It was, at the time, the worst hurricane the U.S. had seen. It gained strength, and I know there's no map of the Caribbean up here, but it gained strength in the Caribbean and hooked around and hit Florida. And just hit Florida really hard. Goes back out to sea and gains strength again, and then slams back into the Carolinas and just devastates South Carolina in particular. Worst hurricane the country has seen at the time. I was 17 and in my senior year of high school, and I worked as a framing carpenter in a prefab building factory where we would build wall panels and roof trusses and floor joists and things for homes up north. So that we would, in the factory, to specifications, we put all the walls together for like the bedroom and the kitchen and the other rooms, and tie them all together and put them on a truck. Then we put the floor joists together so they could just take them up, set them into the foundation, nail them in, and the subfloor's done. Then they take the walls and take them off the truck and just stand the walls up and nail them down in place, and the walls are done. Then they take our roof trusses off, stack the roof trusses on, nail them in place. What am I talking? Anybody who's built a home, where you cantilever them together, and then your roof is done, and you're ready to start finish carpentry. And you could take all of our bits off of this house and get the whole house framed in under a day, because we've done it all in a factory. So I was effectively a framing carpenter. A very junior, very apprentice, not very skilled framing carpenter. Well, when this hurricane hit, I came to work that morning, and the guys, the much more experienced carpenters on the line said, "You drive a truck, don't you?" I said, "You've got an old Ford Ranger pickup truck out here." Like, good. Go with Steve. Like, "You got any money on you? Like, you got any money, like any money at all?" I was like, "Yeah, I got like $200 or $300 bucks." A lot of money when you're 17. Like, "All right, go with Steve. You're gonna go to Lowe's, fill up the back of your truck with plywood and 2x4s. Meet us back here. We're going to finish out tomorrow's shift and go home and pack up a bunch of stuff. We're leaving at 7 a.m. "What do you mean?" "We need you in your truck to carry 2x4s and plywood. Since you're one of the guys who has a truck, go home and pack a bag. Come back here, bring all your tools. We leave at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. We're going Florida." What? I thought I was being kidnapped. I effectively was being kidnapped by carpenters because I had a pickup truck. They said, "No, there's this huge hurricane. You've seen it on the news. The hurricane is hitting today. We're going to leave tomorrow morning. By the time the hurricane leaves, we're going to be right behind it with 5 truckloads full of 2x4s and plywood, and we're going to fix things. We're going to do construction down there." I was like, "Oh, you mean like volunteer work?" They said, "The hell we are." Volunteer my ass. No. We did. I mean, first of all, I thought my parents were going to just flip their lid. And my mom was like, "That's a really good idea. See you in a week." I had not yet had the benefit of my first economics class. And I thought, this is going to be a nightmare. This is going to be ridiculous. I'm going to go down there with these guys. We're not going to find any money. I'm out $300 for all this stupid lumber. This isn't going to work. This is dumb. Remember I told you I missed that call on the self-serve checkout lanes? That's 2. Missed this one big time. Missed it huge. Got there the next morning, drove all the way straight through Florida, traded drivers in and out, drove all the way down, looking at the news and papers, find out where the worst hit hurricane areas are, drive right in, out of the truck, straight to work. Our foreman who ran our shift for us in the factory just switched right over and started negotiating and running our shift down there. It was the strangest thing I'd ever seen. He just took over and started, deciding who we were going to work for and where. He looked for who needed the help the most, or who we could fix, or that's just a hole in a roof. I can give you 2 guys, and we'll get them on that. And this, we just got to reframe this window. These 2 guys know how to do that, and he just took over. We patched roofs, fixed windows, boarded up homes. Patched up some entryways and things where we could. We fixed a lot of roofs, some flooring and stuff. Not many people in Florida have garages like we have here. They have carports, probably for this reason. But we fixed a couple garages, that kind of thing. We were down there, I think, for like 4.5, 5 days. At night, we would either sleep in our vehicles, or we just take some 2x4s and wood and build like a little shelter right there. And in the morning, take it apart and use the wood. We were down there for 4 or 5 days and made a fortune, okay, bank for a 17-year-old kid on a summer job. And our people at the factory we worked, I thought, man, they're going to fire us. Like, we just walked off the job and left. We're going to get fired. And we get back, and the guys are like, "No, we just called all our clients and said, listen, you're on a 4 or 5 day delay. Our carpenters all just left. Like they all just headed to Florida. They're down there fixing the hurricane. Like in the construction business, people just know this happens in construction. Has anybody ever done anything like this? You? Where'd you go?
I went to Henryville and I got hit by
Henryville? Volunteer or cash?
volunteer.
Did you have one?
Oh, I helped an Andrew too.
Did you help an Andrew? It was a mess, wasn't it?
Yeah.
No services, no, like, this is before the days of cell phones everywhere. It was cell phones some places, but no phone, no nothing. I mean, we were some of the first ones on the ground with tool belts and equipment, and God, were they happy to see us show up. Yeah, yours?
My ex went to Tuscaloosa.
What's that?
My ex went to Tuscaloosa.
Did he?
Yes, and it was atrocious.
As a carpenter or a?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did he come home with a giant sack of money?
Yeah, he
Yeah.
made a lot of money. He was down there for a long time though. He was down there for like 3 months.
Was that after the tornadoes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Giant sack of money?
Yeah.
Yeah, I came home with a giant sack of money. Here's the point I'm getting to with this story, and here's the questions I'm going to ask. Before the hurricane hit, everybody's happy and just living the life in Florida, sunny and happy and fantastic. What was the elasticity like for lumber, 2x4s and plywood? What was the elasticity like for 2x4s and plywood and stuff?
Pretty elastic.
Pretty elastic, I would say. That says lumber subscript before. Afterward, after the hurricane hit, now what happens to the elasticity of lumber and plywood? What happens to the demand for lumber and plywood? It has skyrocketed. What has happened to the demand for skilled framing carpenters? It has skyrocketed. Because of this, and like I said, when we left, I thought that this was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard of. I thought we're never going to get any work. Nobody's going to want us to work on their house. We're just weirdo strangers from Kentucky. This is not going to work out. We would be working on one house, and literally people from other homes would come over and try to bid us more to quit working on their neighbor's home and come work on theirs. They would come over and say, "What's he giving you? $50 for the two of you? Give you 60. You really mean you want me to stop working on your neighbor's home, put my tools up and go over to your house?" "Yes, that's what I want you to do. Yes. I would like you to please do that. Come with me." We didn't, but they wanted us to. I draw the line somewhere, and that's about where. But we weren't the only ones, of course. We're not the only ones who had this idea. There were carpenters and plumbers and roofers and things from all over the Southeast. We converged on Florida, showed up out of nowhere. We would be out sleeping in our trucks and sleeping underneath, the plywood and stuff, and there'd be other guys lined up all around us. We'd make campfires. There were other guys out here. We're sitting there eating our soup out of a can, getting ready for the next day when we wake up at 6 in the morning. You're making $50, $60 an hour. How long are you going to sleep? Not that long. The opportunity cost of sleep was high. We wanted to get back to work. We worked until we were out of supplies. The point of this story is prices can change and elasticity can change, and they can change dramatically. And prices serve as a system that coordinates. Prices serve as a system that coordinates supply and demand. There's a great commercial that was out, I think when Hurricane Katrina hit, that it showed a Lowe's truck that drove up to an intersection, and it's got its left-hand turn signal on it. And you hear a voiceover that says, "Hurricane Katrina is going to hit, it's going to, a state of emergency declared," and you see the truck turn off its left turn signal and turn on its right turn signal. What would companies like Lowe's and Home Depot and stuff, when they know this is going to happen, do you think they're going to shift their supply? Absolutely.